Hello and welcome to the H. Thornhill Community Shul. Today we are very happy to welcome with us a very exciting guest speaker, actually from Israel, who we have joining us today, talking about I think, a very important topic right now with COVID and coronavirus and everybody getting stir crazy. And his name is Rabbi Shimshon Meir Frankel. And we're here to talk about his book, The Wisdom of Getting Unstuck. And it's really, I think, I'll let him explain it, but I think the way that I understand it, what I'm excited about talking to him today, is I think really a bit of a handbook of getting out of, unproductive or self-destructive habits that I think are all the more important to break out of during this time like this. So, Rabbi Frankel, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate you inviting me to speak with you.
Wonderful. So you're living in Israel now. Whereabouts in Israel do you live?
Yeah, my wife Tzipora and I and our 6 children, we live in Zichron Yaakov, Israel, which is about a half an hour drive from Haifa.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I was relating to Tzipora that I've never been to Thornhill, but I spent a lot of time in Ontario as a kid. Like when I'm from the Detroit suburbs. So my friend Alan Goldberg and his family used to take me some summers to Pinewood to go camping. Also, the Stratford Festival. I went with my parents many times to the Shakespearean, bonanza. And Windsor was literally about a 20-minute drive away from where I grew up.
Right.
And I remember the fact that the drinking age was so low. That seemed to be a pretty big deal at the time.
That's true. I remember these things.
Yeah, I mostly took the tunnel. It was a lot of fun to see the flags, the crossover of the American flag and the Canadian flag.
Sure.
Every time. I did take the bridge a couple times. And I don't know if you remember the times before 9/11, but it was just so easy to go in and back and forth. You just drive up and they would just ask citizenship, and I'd say U.S. Destination. I would tell them, and they just said, "Have a nice day." Now what I understand is you need a passport and you have to answer many more questions.
Wow.
Which is
it will certainly change.
Yeah, and I used to take Air Canada all the time back and forth to Israel because I would just go to Windsor Airport. It's such a Pittsville little airport. I remember a time that the Frankels are very prompt. We arrive places very early, and I think we got to the airport about an hour before, ahead of schedule, because you have to be prepared. And when we got there was like nobody there, absolutely nobody there. And they were nice enough to put me on an earlier flight to Toronto. They said, "Oh, why wait here? We'll put you on an earlier flight and send you on the way to Toronto." And growing up in the Detroit area, we also spoke a little funny. I found that out because I was talking to my wife about the eaves troughs. The eaves. My mother had her eaves cleaned out, and she said, "What are those?" So it ends up that those are the gutters. Yeah, I didn't grow up calling them gutters. And I'm probably dating myself quite a bit, but when the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs were playing and they were in Toronto, I would actually dial tune to channel 9, just to listen to the Canucks announce the game. Yeah, is saying Canuck nowadays a derogatory term? I'm just curious.
I don't think so. I'm not offended. It's all right.
Okay.
Wonderful. So you grew up there. How old were you when you made Aliyah?
Well, I made Aliyah after I got married, but I came to Israel when I was 26, and I got married the day before my 30th birthday. So I'll always be 29, and we're coming up on our 20-year anniversary. It's coming up in Adar, so we're very excited about that.
Happy anniversary and happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. And my wife was also born in Adar, in Shushan Purim. So we're a big Adar family. Well, not all of our kids were born in Adar, but yeah,
Well,
it's good
now you,
to start, the marriage b'simcha. Yeah. So
there you go. So, tell me, so you're a rabbi and a psychologist by training, is that correct?
that's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
and so a little bit about the psychology that you practice. What's your focus or your field?
Okay, well, I've been practicing privately for around a little over 24 years, no, about 25 years now. And I'd say my approach is a bit different than other practitioners. I utilize what I call a soul brewed, person centered, uh, Torah driven approach to therapy. And my method is a healthy blend of Musar, Chassidus, and Makshava. Yeah, I'm a student of Makshava, and my work is highly influenced by the Maharal, the Ramchal, the Ramak, and other Sifrei Makshava. And I just want, I once asked Rabbi Mendel Farber at Chappelle's, I was learning in Chappelle's at the time, what the difference is between Musar and Makshava. Do you know, have you heard the difference, Rob,
No.
between, no? So you should know that back in his time when he was learning in the Chaim Berlin, Rabbi Farber was the only bacher in the yeshiva with a car. So he actually had the schus to drive around his Rosh Yeshiva. Wherever his Rosh Yeshiva had to go, he got to drive him. So he had a lot of personal time with the Rav Hutner Zatzal. So I really want to get Rabbi Farber's voice in here. He said to me, after I asked him, what's the difference between Musar and Makshava? And Rabbi Farber said, well, Shimshon Meir, if I give you a clear answer, then these are my Rosh Yeshiva's words. But if it's not so clear and you don't understand it, then they're my words. So I guess I could say the same thing. I'll try and explain it. My understanding, according to his Rosh Yeshiva, there are two energies in the world, two powers. And one is deep in the Homer, into the physical world, into the earth, into the ground. And the other one descends from above. And so Musar is for that energy that comes from the earth, that comes up and tries to pull us down into the material world, to pull us into the earth. And what Musar, I guess, does is when we learn it, we can push it down. As it's coming to pull us up, we push it back down into the earth, which raises us up. It raises us, makes us higher. Whereas Makshava, what Makshava does is it allows us to think in a way which we can attach ourselves, right? Reach up and attach ourselves to this descending energy that's coming from above, and it grabs on to that thought and pulls us up, raises us up. I thought it was a very fascinating distinction. Excuse me while I drink.
So I was going to say, so where does that fit in then in terms of your psychology? In other words, where does, which sort of approach or method, if you want to call it that, are you more colored by? Or are they both sort of part of the same, quiver of arrows that you're utilizing?
Good question. See, I went away to yeshiva after I had already gone to graduate school and had been working in my own private practice for a while. So I came to Torah wearing like psychological lenses, and it's my thing. I also see it as my duty, and I think I always have, to share with my clients and the world, which is a lot to do with the book, the psychological tools and guiding principles that Hashem's Torah has to offer. And these, these principles have been in existence for thousands of years. So when it comes to the field of psychology, well, as we read in Kohelet, there's nothing new under the sun. That's really my opinion. Obviously, when all of that beautiful energy came down into the world, and that information and that knowledge, it got picked up by all different fields and all different ways of thinking and trades of thought. So, psychology picked it up along the way, but that's not its original source. So I see it as my job to promote and to show people where this all these ideas really come from. And again, that's the big thing about my book. So I purposely included many of these like Torah-driven principles and tools that I use in my book. I mean, in my work. I put those in the book. Yeah, and I reference them. I place the sources as footnotes, because there are some people who really want to look at them themselves. They want to see the sources for themselves. Yeah, that was really the oomph behind it. It's not all in there. I have some other books in the works. Hopefully, I'll be able to share more with people in the future.
So you mentioned your book, Rabbi. Tell us about where your book sort of fits in into this approach and into this philosophy. I mean, what was the genesis of it, and what the impetus to to write this? I mean, as you say, you've been doing this for 2.5 decades. Why now with the book?
Yeah, why now? Yeah, so I was very inspired to write the book because I had made a really big shift in the way I was working with people. I'd say it really, the shift happened around 8 years ago. I started working more online, and that allowed me to become like more proactive in my sessions with people. I used to allow people, as we say in the biz, to unfold naturally, which works.
You said, sorry, to what naturally?
Unfold naturally. There's this, and it is a Torah principle that people are always seeking to grow, always seeking to become better, to become that best version of themselves. And so also there is a wing in psychology which agrees with this. It's a much more, I would think we would call it an existential phenomenological approach, which I've been privy to, spent a lot of time learning about that. So allowing someone to unfold naturally means not to push. If we push a person, we might, chas v'sholom, even step on their process, which might not just slow them down, but it might stop them in their tracks. So I always held to this idea that I'll let somebody slowly evolve, right? Slowly unfold in a natural way. And it really does work. It's super effective, but it takes a long time. And thanks to this new medium of video conferencing, I was able to start asking more guiding questions. I started sharing more information up front. And that's when I realized that I can help people reach their goals much more quickly. And for me, that was very exciting. And I started to write it all down because I saw that there was a sort of an inventive feel to it. There was something new about it. So how did the book really come about? It's really a crazy story. And you can see the hashgacha in it. Mosaic Press, which is the publishing company, they actually sent me an email. And it was actually Rabbi Yaakov Haber's son, Shui, who reached out to me. And at the time, I had been running an online institute for relationship enrichment. It was basically based in the Jerusalem area, but the platform was online, and it was called Chedva, Chedva Institute for Relationship Enrichment, and that just happens to be Shui's wife's name. So I don't know, he must have been messing about on online and found the institute, and he sent me an email, and in the email he indicated that Mosaica would love to do a project with me. The truth is, I always had the idea in the back of my mind to write a book, but I didn't really feel so ready at the time, so I pushed them off. At the time, I was in the middle of building a new website, and I was putting a lot of the new material on the website. And you remember websites, don't you? Yeah. So that website is actually obsolete now. And during that time, other practitioners that I spoke to, people I was working with, they kept egging me on. They kept saying, you really have something important to share here. You need to share this stuff with the world. Yeah. And that's all very validating. We all like to hear these things, but we also have to be ready. Right? We have to feel like, okay, I can take that next step. And a lot of that has to do with the vision, right? Knowing exactly where we're headed. And since I had this in the back of my mind, this idea, someday I'm gonna write a book, I had actually recorded and transcribed a series of interactive classes with the Bachrim here in the yeshiva in Zichron. So I had, when Mosaica reached out to me, I had 60 odd pages in a Google Doc. I had no idea what that meant for like an actual book, like how many pages in a book that would be. I speak about this in my introduction in my book. I really had no idea then how to turn a series of classes into a book. So I admit, after trying to restructure things on my own, I decided to hire an editor. She's a woman in LA, and I have to say, she was great. She ended up being more like a coach, and she was my greatest advocate. She let me brainstorm for a full year. I sat down and I put down about 500,000 words. At some point, she suggested I call Mosaic and ask, how many words do you normally put in, say, a self-help book like of this nature? And you know what they told me? 30,000, 35,000, at most maybe 50,000. So I had taken all those 500,000 words and I had restructured them into about what in my mind, I wanted to turn it into one long, gigantic book. So I divided it into about 4 sections. So I basically had written a rough draft of 3.5 to maybe 4 books. And then my writing coach said to me what I was really dreading. I knew it was going to come because when I was in middle school, I took a creative writing class and I had a great teacher. And that was back in the day when we actually had to write things by hand. So I had taken some of my parents' old letterhead, which is that long yellow colored paper. And I wrote and wrote and wrote. And I remember afterward, my teacher saying the nicest things, You wrote so many nice things here, but I think you need to choose one. You've written many stories here. You just need to choose one. And that's exactly what my writing coach said. It looks like you've written a number of books here, but you have to choose one. That was the roughest 5 minutes of my life, because, I was stuck in that moment. It's just amazing. So I decided to go with my first book, which was to go with the individual. I have a lot written about couples and relationships. I work with couples. I love it. But I was seeing more and more that people were getting stuck in life and needed some guidance. And yes, I'm a rabbi. Yes, I'm a psychologist or psychotherapist, but I just look at myself as a guide. I'm there just to help direct people down the path that they really want to be going down. And in this writing coaching, maybe people can actually learn from my experience, just because I really feel that the actual writing, the process of writing it really did reflect or imitate real life. While I was writing, I would get stuck like in a fork in the road. So like I didn't know, should I do this thing or should I do that thing? I just so inexperienced. So I would call her up and I'd ask her, should I go this way or this way? And she said, what should I focus on first? And her advice was always invaluable. She would just tell me, you got to go this way. Start with this. So, if you're thinking about writing a book and you want her contact information, I'll send it to you in an email. Then I point this out in the introduction, that the writing process itself, it very much reflects our normal struggles in life. And that's where the muddy middle comes in. The muddy middle is that place where we tend to get stuck in life when we're trying to move from point A to point B.
And so really, I think now, this is, as I said in the introduction, I think this is a very timely period for this book to, to be written and to be relevant in people's lives. How do you think people should be, approaching this kind of book, especially right now when people are, even if there's light at the end of the tunnel, it's been a frustrating time, and no doubt there's going to be a lot of frustration still ahead. But how do you see your book playing into people's experiences right now?
I think the question we need to ask ourselves right now is, what is it that we're feeling right now? The world is obviously, it's become a different place, and we're unsure of what the future holds. A lot of us do feel alone and disconnected from others and ourselves. We sense that there's a lack, like there's something missing. Of course, we experience this as a negative. As much as we yearn to continue living life the way we once did, things are going to be different from now on. And many people do describe feeling broken, lost, stuck in a rut right now. It's paralyzing for some people. The bottom line is we're all stuck somewhere in this muddy middle. But the good news is that the tools that we use to get out of this muddy place, they've stayed the same. The way to strengthen our relationships, that hasn't changed. People are always telling me that, they want, what people want to hear, when they listen to me, are case studies. Talk about your clients, but keep it anonymous, they say. The truth is, I'm actually a listener at heart. my nature is to listen. And I'm convinced that people choose to work with me because I'm such a private person. I'm not here to talk about other people, to tell other people's stories. It's my job to listen to people's stories and help them make them better. And I find that everyone is so different. They use their own language to describe their, their personal struggles. The labels that they place on themselves, they're their own. Certainly not my job. I didn't write a book in order to force ideas or psychological terms on anyone. So I gave this some thought. I think it's best for me to tell a little bit about my own story. I could talk a little bit about a difficult time that I went through recently. It lasted only about a week. And yeah, it felt like a year. It really did. But I was actually able to work through it in a week. And there's always going to be some residue. There's always that. And I'm hoping that if I share a little bit about the process that I went through, it'll be very enlightening for everyone. So how can I explain it? I was basically trapped in an unhealthy relationship. I won't tell you all the juicy details, but let's just say that the last conversation I had with this person left me feeling very uncomfortable. I had been forced into a corner and I felt trapped. I realized that the steps I'm going to share with you came surprisingly natural to me. But that's only because this wasn't my first rodeo. The steps that I took were based on steps I've taken many times in the past to overcome similar life struggles. And you can get a good taste of this in the book. Now, we're extremely resourceful people. So my immediate step after walking away from this traumatic experience was to speak to my wife, Zipporah. We all need a confidant in our lives, someone who can, act as a sounding board, someone who's willing to listen and not jump down our throats, not feel the need to give us immediate advice. I was feeling trapped, so I couldn't think straight. My emotions had taken over. I needed some help to get a handle on them. So she listened, talked a bit, and afterward, of course, she smiled and suggested I start taking my own advice. So once I became aware of this, I was finally able to ask myself, is continuing to think and feel in this negative way, like really in my best interest? So what are we supposed to do with our negative emotions? I actually got an answer for this from my Rebbe many years ago. He was going through an emotionally difficult time, but life as a Rosh Hashiva just seemed to go on normally for him. So I asked him point blank, don't you feel anything? My experience has been in the West, we've been taught that there are two options when it comes to our emotions. And they're two polar opposites. On one side of the spectrum, we're told to feel, not to feel our emotions. Some of us have even been told, That's what it means to be a man. You're weak if you let your emotions get to you. If you even feel them. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we're told emotions are okay. We should embrace every one of them. Even if they could lead to harming ourselves or others. Self-harm is a real thing. So I asked my Rebbe, doesn't anything bother you? Don't you feel anything? And you know what he answered? And he said, of course I do. And then I let it go. This is the third option. We can always take pause and ask ourselves, is this feeling and way of thinking actually good for me? Is it really in my best interest to hold on to it? So why was this all so important? Because I was feeling trapped inside of my own emotions. I reached out to a social worker as well. And it was in that discussion where I realized I had been forced into a corner. When we're caught in a corner, it triggers a fight or flight response. I was deep in preservation mode. And that means I was suiting up for battle. But who was I going to war with, Rob? It's true that some people end up lashing out at others, but many just turn their energies inwards, like I tend to do. It reminds me of a Rambam. In the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah, he speaks about the rules of going into battle. Pushing an army into a corner is not a good tactic. It's like cornering an animal. If it feels trapped, it has nowhere else to go, no other outlet, it will fight to the death. It'll come back fiercely because it feels that its life is in danger. So according to the Rambam, if we don't give the enemy an alternative way out, they're going to win the war. So I had my resources. I already had my exit plans in place. I reached out to some friends. And I knew it was the right thing to do because I was yearning to connect with people with whom I have healthy relationships. A good and healthy relationship is one where we're accepted unconditionally, without any judgment and without expectations. I guess I'd like to speak a little bit about the residue. I still have some. And that's just because that's how trauma works. Trauma is confounding. When we have a traumatic experience, it triggers every other traumatic experience that we've ever had. It's like we're being traumatized by every one of the traumatic experiences we've ever had all at once. It's dramatic. Man, it's still kind of fresh for me. So, sometimes just hearing our tormentor's name can trigger a traumatic response. But I have to say, the last time it happened, I felt, all this negativity swirling around in my belly. But this time I told myself, no, I've had enough of this feeling. I'm way too busy for this. Right? Not enough real estate in my mind for that. I'm not giving it any power. So this pandemic has been traumatic for all of us. And strangely, it's become kind of what we're used to. But we do have hope for the future. Now, in order to move forward, we always have to ask ourselves, okay, where do we go from here? I know my whereabouts. I know where I am, however comfortable it is or not, but where do I go from here? So if the steps that I've taken, to get beyond and get unstuck from my unhealthy relationships aren't yet natural for you, we could actually take the time right now to do a simple exercise. Do we have the time for that?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's. I want to. Yeah. Let's do a brief exercise, and then we'll wrap up. Sure. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
So this is one thing I often do with my clients to start them off on the right foot. We do this by tapping into our power of imagery. So I'd like you to take in a couple of deep breaths, let them out, free your mind a bit. And I'd like you to imagine someone in your life that you'd feel comfortable reaching out to. Someone safe, someone who accepts you unconditionally, without judgment and without expectations. You can even close your eyes right now if that helps. So if you can picture in your mind the last time you spent time with this person. Where are you located? What's the scene look like? Like what are you doing? Are you doing something together? Is there somebody else there with you? Do you remember the topic of conversation? Now, I'll tell you why this works. Our ability to remember, and to conjure up, to actually tap into this image in our minds in the here and now, it's all because it's not just in the past for us. Imagining it now brings it alive for us in the moment. It's alive for us right now in this moment. So I'd like you to take that feeling of security, safety, right, the comfort, and when you get a chance, send that person a text or an email. Okay? And if they're from an earlier generation, they probably would love a handwritten letter from you. That's also a good practice. Typing out or writing out what you're struggling with right now. In the end, it makes us feel freer. Just this step can help us to feel less stuck and less trapped in our muddy middle.
Well, and you have other exercises like that in your book. I mean, that's quite, I think that's quite a powerful thing, powerful little exercise to be able to really embrace and the comfort, I think, and direction that it would bring.
Yeah, it's chock full of exercises like that. The beginning of the book is very much devoted to, I'd say, the philosophy behind things, what we call like the meat and potatoes. And then, towards the end of the book, I take people through a journey, an actual exercise. I call it walking your own path, because as we know, I like to speak in stories. We have our own story to tell, and we're the main character in our story. And as we know, a good story always has to have some type of opposing force, and that opposing force is called our antagonist. So yeah, I show how the antagonist gets us into sticky situations, and show clever ways of getting ourselves out of them, and step-by-step exercises to get out of our own personal, muddy middles, and move forward in life. And yeah, I hope people will go out and get the book, and hope, enjoy. I mean, my job really is to help people out, help guide people. So obviously, if people would have any questions, they should be in touch with me.
And they can get your book, the Wisdom of Getting Unstuck, and we'll happily have a link. And that's available on both Amazon and Mosaic Press as well, or where's the preferred place where they can get it?
Either one works. Mosaic Press has their own e-commerce. It's on Amazon. It's already supposedly in the English-speaking Jewish bookstores and all over the world, because Mosaic uses Feldheim distribution. And or you can come by, because I have a few copies. I have a few copies at home here. This is what the book looks like. Feels good in the hand. Somebody had said to me, "Have you felt your book yet? Have you held it in your hands?" I never really gave it too much thought, but it is quite a spectacular feeling to have your own book in hand.
Tremendous accomplishment. And I was going to ask you also, as I guess as a clinical psychologist, individuals would be able to, if they read the book and they like what they hear and they want to tap more into it from a primary source, I guess how can they be in touch with you on your website if they wanted to have some kind of a Zoom or a phone call consultation or meeting, or however, how can they find you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is my name, shimshonmeirfrankel.com, and they can sign up for a meeting. I have my email address there as well. And yeah, just get in touch with me, and we'll connect, and we'll talk about it. If you, even if you're just curious about things, I can give you 15 minutes. It'll be fun. Let's do it.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, this has been a very enjoyable time speaking with you. Again, Rabbi Shimshon Meir Frankel and his book, The Wisdom of Getting Unstuck. And I appreciate your time. And as I mentioned, this has been recorded, so we'll send you the link afterwards. And obviously, please feel free to distribute, to your friends and family as you see fit. And we'll certainly do the end as well. And again, on behalf of the H. Hill Community Shul, I want to thank you for joining us and for telling us about your book and the work that you do.
It's been a pleasure and honor, Rob. I really appreciate you inviting me to have this discussion with you.
Wonderful. Well, all the best and Mazal Tov on the book.
Oh, man.
Take care.
All the best to you and family.
Bye-bye. You as well.